Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the closing chapters of Part 3 of Higurashi, Tatarigoroshi. When we last left our hero, we had been thrown off a bridge by Satoko, mercilessly, after maybe maybe a little bit too aggressively admitting to murder. I think she cares more about the loss of her friend than the other two people that died because we wish they died. I don't know if they actually died because of us or what, but it was a bit of a mess. I'm curious if we'll find out if they actually died because they wanted them dead. Or we'll see. Yeah, well, I guess we'll just find out. Anyway, my head was pounding. Probably because we fell into... I don't know if I think we fell into a river with, like, rocks. I don't know how deep the river is. It might have just been, like, a couple inches of a stream. Or we might have been, like, washed away by the tide or some shit. I guess we'll find out now. The sky was bright. It was cold, too. It hurt. Each sensation I felt led to a new and different one awakening. This doesn't look that deep, right? This looks like the kind of river you'd fall in, and you'd be like knee deep at most. When I came to, I was lying face first on a dry riverbed. A few body parts hurt a lot. The skin over a bunch of my joints was torn, turned blue or red, or oozing blood. I could tell it was my bones that were in pain from the agony I felt whenever I moved. I looked up and saw how high the bridge from which I had fallen was. Considering I dropped from there, it was a miracle I could open my eyes again. Right next to me was a broken, upside-down car seat, which I guess some pranksters brought here. Maybe this had been conveniently lying right under me, allowing me to escape instant death. Miraculous. Of course, I didn't know whether this miracle was fortunate or unfortunate. I had failed to die, and now I was still stuck in this insane world. How long had I been unconscious for? The sun was high in the sky, so it looked like only 1 or 2 hours had passed. But my body's sluggishness didn't make it feel at all like so short a time had gone by. Mentally, it felt like I'd been asleep here for a decade. The more feeling returned to my body, the more pain flooded in. I don't think there's a river near any significant attractions, right? It hurt so much it would have been better not to have woken up. I needed to get to a doctor, to Coach's clinic. The term Coach's clinic brought memories back one after another. Memories I wish I hadn't recalled. Satoko wasn't no longer on the bridge. She would have returned to Hinamizawa by now. And she'd put on some clothes, go to the clinic, get a checkup, and report on how crazy I seemed. The police were waiting for me without a doubt. And this time they'd find out for real I killed her uncle and arrest me, or they'd send me to a mental institution like I thought they might. Still, I didn't care which it was. Someone needs to stop all this pain. You can boil me or cook me after that, whatever you like. I began to walk unsteadily, just limping along. He's not dead, and he's able to walk. Well, I mean, you gotta get help somehow. It's not like anyone nearby is gonna help you since you're in the back of the shrine. I went downstream and through an animal trail-like path in the woods. I walked haphazardly, searching for a path I knew. Eventually, I came across a familiar road and set off towards the clinic. Not to my house, but the clinic, which had treated me like a lunatic. Well, I mean, your parents can't help you that much. They'll just drive you to the hospital, right? There's only so much help you can actually get, assuming you make it there. It was hot and humid. There was no wind, and the air was stagnant. For a while now, I'd been smelling the terrible stench of burned eggs, and it made my face scrunch up. And then at last I noticed something. I couldn't hear any cicadas. That's right, it's dead silent. After the river sound effects stopped playing, there's nothing coming out of the game audio. It was the first time I'd heard Hinamizawa be so utterly silent. When I thought back, it seemed like birds always chirped in the morning, cicadas always cried loudly in the afternoon, and Higurashi always rose up in chorus in the evening, always something to hear. I couldn't hear a single insect. The only thing I could hear was the rustling of the wind brushing the treetops. I'd never experienced this sort of quiet before. But the minute we noticed that, the game audio started playing again. Some ominous music, of course. Even the only sound coming from the trees lacked life somehow. The trees were yellow and many leaves were spread on the ground despite it being too early for autumn. Even the weeds that had been growing so persistently at the side of the road had yellowed, browned, and lost their vigor. Has he been unconscious longer than he thought he was? Like, he's a ghost or some shit now? Only the sunlight itself was of the June Hinamizawa I knew. And yet it seemed like the seasons had switched all of a sudden. Looking at the fallen leaves and rotting weeds led me to spot a few small insects. Led me to spot a few small insects turned on their backs. They weren't moving. They were corpses. I looked closer to see insect corpses scattered about, like a child collected them as samples and strewn them about. This stench, what was it? It was terrible, like burned eggs, combined with all the bug corpses and leaves falling from the trees in summer. Burnt eggs, sulfur? Had someone sprayed herbicides or pesticides around here? Even at school, we apparently fumigate. They call it pest disinfection or something once or twice a year. I hadn't run into anybody despite how bright it was outside. It was mid-afternoon and yet it felt like I was sauntering about at midnight. Well, with this smell, no one would want to be walking around outside. Just what was this anyway? There was no sound, no noise, not even a breath. Hinamizawa was silent. The school would come into view right after turning this corner, and yet I couldn't hear any commotion at all, none of the shouts or grunts that children always made. It was simply quiet. I mean, they could be inside, right? Just as pretending to ignore this silence had grown intolerable, I saw the school. Finally, I heard something. The sound of a few trucks. There were a few very tall trucks parked in the schoolyard, idling. About 10 workers in raincoats were unloading things from their trunks. It was hot and humid, even in my casual clothing. I couldn't imagine how unbearable that must have been. And then I remembered. Our school's rented from the Forest Service field office building, right? It's not strange at all for their trucks to be doing something in the schoolyard. Besides, what did they do anyway? I felt bad for having to work in such a heat with such a stench about. They were taking colorful cargo out of the truck and lining it up in the schoolyard. There were containers, fairly large ones, inside multicolored patchwork bags. Heavy, too. They were being carried in pairs. They lined them up very neatly like tuna at a riverside fish market. Several dozens, hundreds of tuna completely filling the fairly wide schoolyard up. I forgot my pain for a while, captivated by this big forest ranger job I'd never seen before. As I stood there watching in a daze, the people in raincoats working on the other side noticed me. One of them pointed me out and they showed a few things back and forth. I thought they might yell at me for getting in their way, so I decided to leave post-haste. But then 2 trucks drove up behind me. I stepped aside as they entered the schoolyard. Sheets covered their trunks, but I could tell they were completely full. As they passed, there was an awful smell that made me want to choke. Are these all bodies? I was kind of getting that idea, considering they were both carrying them in their colorful bags, but is everyone in the place dead? I guess we'll find out, right? That's what I'm thinking. It wasn't the same burned egg smell as before, but a worse one, like rotten crab meat. Is everyone in the village dead, and it's just like some people from outside? Or people who weren't in the village? What on earth was it? I'd been enshrouded in one terrible stench after another all day. And then certain white letters emblazoned on the side of the passing trucks caught my eye. Ground Self-Defense Forces. What? The Self-Defense Forces? Like the army? Well, why is the army in the schoolyard? Hey you! Where did you come from? Suddenly someone slapped me on the shoulders from behind. I turned around and a canopied SDF Jeep was parked there. The SDF person had on a green raincoat and a gas mask like in the movies, carrying a compressed air cylinder. He didn't look normal. There wasn't an inch of exposed skin anywhere. When I tried to talk, I stretched a wound on my head. Made the SDF people exchange glances. I couldn't see the faces through their masks, but they seemed surprised. Do you live in Hinamizawa? Can you tell us your name and address? Yeah, I sort of live here. My name's Keiichi. My address is 123 Hinamizawa Village, Shishibon. After seeing me tell them my name and address without hesitation, one of them started talking into a radio. Base, do you read? We have a 402 survivor discovered. I repeat, we have a 402. We found a survivor. He's in front of the Forest Service office. This is base, we copy. Secure the survivor at once. What's his status? Healthy. Wounded all over, but not fatally. He can walk on his own. We'll send him to HQ for safety. I was prepared to go along with the police, but the SDF, well, I couldn't help but think it seemed a little bit much. They urged me into the back of the Jeep, and then they told me to put on this gigantic gas mask. I did so, and one of the troops fiddled with it, strapping it tightly to me. It was heavy, hard to see out of hot and difficult to breathe. Just looking at the world through the lenses made it lose its sense of reality. My breathing sounded like some giant monster through the mask. Oh wait, it's the 80s. No, Star Wars was out. He could have said he sounded like Darth Vader. At this point, I had no idea what was happening. With much trepidation, I asked the trooper adjusting my mask, excuse me, has something happened? Where were you? What were you doing? Don't answer a question with more questions. I was the one asking you. I fell from a rope bridge way back in the mountains. I think I passed out on the riverbed. I don't actually know what day it is. Today is June 22nd, 1983. Wednesday. That surprised me. Satoko pushed me off the bridge on the 21st. So he was unconscious for an entire day. That meant I'd been asleep on the riverbed for an entire day. Forgive me, did something happen? Why is the SDF here? Is this a drill? Had my question been that difficult for him? None of the troopers would answer me. The one in the driver's seat talking on his own radio turned on the vehicles. He turned the dial and some broadcast station or another came in. I started to listen to the voice of a radio announcer I was familiar with. Was conducted at the Prime Minister's office in regards to questions from the press that the SDF not responding to the disaster promptly was directly related to this unprecedented, unheard of catastrophe, Chief Cabinet Secretary Okuno had this to say. And so, I believe that once the SDF received the dispatch order from the prefectural governor, they responded promptly. According to him, the SDF was prompt to respond to the crisis after receiving the orders. He implied it was the prefecture's responsibility for taking too long to comprehend the situation. When did the governor who requested the dispatch actually become aware of the outbreak of such an unprecedented catastrophe? And did he not invite further damage because time had been lost before he sent the request for disaster relief? In other words, because of bureaucracy, we're waiting further investigation into the matter. That was Mr. Okada, reporting from the Prime Minister's official residence. At this point, we can take another look at the political response following this disaster. It's only been a day. What the fuck happened? In the middle of the night, between June 21st and 22nd, a large-scale disaster broke out in Hinamizawa village, Shishibon. This is a small town/village in the middle of nowhere. The details have not yet been investigated, but there was an eruption of volcanic gas from somewhere in the area. The gas was relatively heavy, and as it spewed out, it began to flow. The flow went down along a small river and headed directly into Hinamizawa village. After a few hours, it covered the entire region. It happened in the middle of the night, 2 to 4 a.m. Every home and household in the village was afflicted. With most of the residents asleep, it's thought they all died without noticing the crisis. The catastrophe striking in the middle of the night caused its detection to come too late. But there was one small opportunity to have noticed it. 3 a.m. A news dealer's shop in Okinomiya sent a vehicle carrying the morning newspaper to its branch office in Hinamizawa. Usually the shop would be contacted on the vehicle's arrival, but this morning, that didn't happen. The news dealer's shop made repeated calls but got no response. The shopkeeper sent his eldest son to check things, but they lost contact with him as well. It's extremely regrettable. If they'd contacted the police or fire department at this point, it's highly possible the situation would have turned out positively. At the very least, it's possible a portion of the village might have been saved from tragic annihilation. 6 a.m. Residents in areas of the same region began continuously calling 119 to report the smell of rotten eggs, dizziness, nausea, and headaches. The fire department received the same reports, all from the same confined region. They speculated a truck loaded with chemicals may have gotten into an accident and reported it to the police. 6:30. Contact lost with a patrol car on duty in the area after the officer reported the smell of rotten eggs. The police considered the possibility of a large-scale disaster involving lethal gas and reported it to the prefecture and prefectural police at 7:15 a.m. 8 a.m. The governor traveling to nearby prefectures for inspection. In accordance with regulations, the Environmental Disaster Prevention Chief was provisionally escalated to Director General and set up a disaster countermeasures office. Okay. Without contacting the governor, the countermeasures came too late. As has recently been pointed out by citizens groups, his trip with honorary Diet members to inspect other prefectures was based solely on good relations, and it's rumored they preoccupied themselves with a drinking party. Sources closer to him claimed the governor had been drinking all night and had gone to sleep in a drunken state. He was completely drunk when the environmental chief phoned him as well, and apparently he couldn't get him to pay attention to the matter. Oof, that sucks. And so authorities, in the hour or so it took for the governor to grasp the situation and sober up, did nothing but accumulate information. Though not as extreme as the governor's case, the environmental chief, who became director general, will also likely be questioned about his negligence. In addition, without any procedures in place on the prefecture's side that predicted catastrophes this massive, they'd always react too late. And that ended up being fatal. Damn, that's a long ass. This is a long list of events for here on the radio. 9:12 a.m. On the advice of the prefectural police, the governor requested a disaster relief mission from the SDF. By the time the chemical defense unit equipped with the protective equipment arrived on scene, 8 hours had passed since the incident's outbreak. Whatever the case may be, it was unfortunate this happened while everyone was sleeping in the middle of the night. Had the same disaster occurred during the day, it would have likely been entirely different. All households in the Hinamizawa village region were wiped out. There were over 1,000 victims. The SDF is still confirming the situation on the ground, but the results are predicted to only increase that number. Here with us in the studio today is Dr. Fujiwara, a professor at, at Tokyo University, who is well acquainted with volcanic disasters. Doctor, can such a sudden and horrible outburst of poisonous gas actually happen? It isn't all unusual for this to happen right around craters, at least. Japan's a volcanic nation and has many active volcanoes. There's always a danger of hazardous gas around any of these craters. It's generally a rule among mountain climbers not to go near them. These would be... Which... It's not... Wait, which gas... This is like... This is... Yeah, that's true. This is true, right? I forget what gas this is. Off the top of my head, it's not coming through my head, but yeah. Does this mean the rotten egg smell that visited Hinamizawa was the sort of gas from volcanic craters? Judging by how it smelled like rotten eggs, we think it was hydrogen sulfide, a gas particularly seen in accidents compared to other volcanic gases. If it's dense, it becomes extremely dangerous. Well, they're far away from craters of any volcanoes. Can hydrogen sulfide be generated from a place not close to a crater? I don't know all the details. I can't say anything concrete, but in other countries there are records of gas eruptions due to magma buildup under hot springs. It's rare, but it's possible for such a thing to happen, even in a region not near craters. Thank you very much, Doctor. We appear to have an announcement from the JDF. Miss Morikawa, are you there? Yes, I'm at the Japan Defense Agency. The agency has just made an announcement regarding the source of the village gas disaster. Analysis from the ground self-defense forces Department of Chemistry has found the gas was a mixture of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. Miss Morikawa, do you know whether the gas is still erupting or spreading to nearby areas? According to the SDF's 9th Division, who are currently engaged in a rescue operation at Hinamizawa village, the gas density is steadily decreasing. They've announced the damage will not spread. However, it does not change the fact surrounding areas are still in danger, and that very strict observation must be maintained. That was Morikawa from the Japanese Defense Agency. And now we have a report on the state of those who've been made to evacuate the Okonomi area. Shimos Shinozaki Elementary School is one of the evacuation sites, and we currently have a reporter on... Wait, what? What? Inside the Jeep? Clambering and bouncing on the rough road, none answered my muttered question. An unprecedented catastrophe destroyed the village in a single night? Where was Hinamizawa village anyway? Someplace deep in the mountains, right? Names of places I'd heard about on the radio were always like that. Where was it? It's where you... Isn't it where you live? There were all places I'd never heard of, much less knew the locations of. Wiped out? What does that mean? Don't they usually say how many died? How many were injured? How many people were alive? Where did everyone evacuate to? I understand that he just woke up and he's probably has some serious head trauma, so I think it's perfectly reasonable for him to be a little bit slow. He is heavily injured. Eventually we came into view of Coach's clinic. For the first time I saw the flag of Japan hanging on a pole outside. Japan's circular sun hung down as though exhausted. Many SDF tents were set up in the clinic's parking lot, and many strict security vehicles were parked there as well. When they saw the Jeep coming, men in white clothing and gas masks came running out of the clinic, frantic, carrying a stretcher. Yeah, he definitely inhaled a good couple lungfuls of the gas. Thankfully, I think hydrogen sulfide... I think the stuff that shows up in volcanic craters is mostly just like gonna kill... will kill you, but it won't... It'll be because you're breathing it instead of air. I don't remember if it destroys your lungs. We'll see. Actually, we could probably look that up, but I could look it up right now, but I think the game will tell us if we're gonna suffer some permanent harm. Let's see, we could look up inhaling hydrogen sulfide. Alright, so I'm gonna... Let's see, low concentrations can produce irritation of throat, nose, and lower respiratory tract. It gets worse, shortness of breath. So let's see. Exposure to lower concentrations just cause respiratory systems, but it can be immediately fatal over a certain density, over 1,000 parts per million. It can affect multiple organs, causing permanent or temporary derangements in nervous, cardiovascular, renal, hepatic, and hematological systems. Blah blah blah. Alright. And inhalation of high concentrations can result in immediate loss of consciousness and death. Yeah, it's mostly low concentrations just cause respiratory system symptoms. I think it's probably survivable. I think if you get exposure, it's just gonna be annoying. I think it's gonna be recoverable. Music feels like an old JRPG. That's true. This seems like it should be in an old Final Fantasy or like Star Ocean or some shit. It's gonna be alright. How do you feel? Can you walk? Yeah. Because of my ows, they forced me to lay in the stretcher anyway. People who seemed like doctors were looking at me and notifying others of my condition via radio. Multiple wounds, high possibility of fractures, and internal damage. Large laceration in the head. Pupils normal even without bleeding from the fundus. Brain damage is still possible. And then from the clinic, people lying on stretchers were brought outside to replace me. Judging by their clothing, they were from Hinamizawa, and that's how I knew they were victims. They brought the stretchers in front of a truck. 2 troops holding shoulders and legs like some kind of baggage. Picked them up and threw them in the trunk. What? In the trunk of the truck, people's bodies piled in heaps. They were just like baggage. And that told me they were already nothing but shells. At that moment, I remembered all those colorful sacks filling the trunks. Lined up in the schoolyard like a fish market. Hundreds of empty shells. Corpses. Corpses. All corpses, my friend. Yep, they're all corpses. I did call that they were corpses, right? Hey, check us! Don't throw the victims like that. They lived here. The troops carrying the sacks answered with a humble salute. The world didn't need this insane version of Hinamizawa. My final wish, again, it was granted. He wanted to destroy this cruel Hinamizawa, and it literally exploded. Everyone is dead. I didn't understand anything anymore. None of it mattered. I wished, I cursed, then it happened the next day. Please, tomorrow morning, let me die. That insane night, it's still going on. Please end it already. Okay, so now I'm more in line with him having supernatural powers now. He kind of wished everyone would this whole village would be cursed and cease to exist, and fucking everybody died now. Hey, he's lost consciousness. Shout his name quickly. Maibara, can you hear me? If you can hear me, blink. Maibara. Suddenly, the world didn't matter anymore. I just wasn't interested in their cries. His breathing stopped. Get his respiratory tract open. Use CPR. Make him live. Damn it. No more dead people. Nobody deserves to die. Don't kill him. Don't kill him. I could hear the voice of a man crying and screaming in my ears. Nobody deserves to die. Those words came from his heart. They were so commonplace they soaked into my heart too. Maybe it was a mistake to take someone's life, even if it was to save Satoko. If this is the price I had to pay, this horrible tragedy. This is a little bit much, Oyashiro-sama. Why didn't you punish me? Come to think of it, Satoko said something. The actual curse never goes for the target at first, but kills everyone they love before that. Oyashiro-sama's curse. It was a convenient excuse, I told myself at the end. That it wasn't my curse that destroyed it, but Oyashiro's. Given that I was in a stretcher, this next bit might have been a bit obvious, but last of all I realized one thing. Yeah, today I hadn't heard those footsteps following me even once. Are we free? And now I was liberated. As the cries of the Higurashi I couldn't have been hearing filled my mind, Their tearful ensemble was the only funeral march I had. I guess he died anyway. June 22nd, 1983, early morning. A widespread disaster occurred in the village of Hinamizawa, Shishibon Prefecture. Volcanic gas erupted from Onigafuchi Swamp, one of the Hinamizawa area's water sources, and spread through the entire village. There were 1,200 victims, 20 have gone missing. The catastrophe was unprecedented, forcing local governments to evacuate approximately 600,000 people. According to later investigations, magma pools and hot springs were uncovered directly under the swamp. The gas that gushed from it was determined to be the cause of the disaster. In addition, directly after the incident broke out, many came forth claiming this disaster was a curse based in Hinamizawa village legends, first sparking a wave of chaos. There were apparently local legends of a curse spreading a miasma destroying the village, and some scholars believe a similar gas disaster may have happened in the past, remaining part of these legends. More extreme periodicals suggested this was an extension of the string of freak deaths happening in recent years in Hinamizawa village, stirring interest in theories about the curse of Oyashiro-sama. In addition, relatives of those in the village who'd escaped the disaster complained of sickness afterwards and were hospitalized. Some of them even died of unknown causes, further encouraging such extreme opinions. On top of that, several relatives professing to be possessed by the curse committed suicide in strange ways. The impact of the disaster has had on the entire nation can no longer be ignored. Wild visions of terrible toxic gas sneaking around the middle of the night, killing people, spilled across the country, causing a steady stream of people complaining of insomnia, difficulty breathing, headache, dizziness, etc. Some, who identified themselves as being obsessed by it, began doing odd things. Most of these were mistakenly attributed by the tabloid press, but afterwards some began to call the mental issues arising from the village tragedy Hinamizawa syndrome. Yeah, this is the most catastrophically bad ending we've had so far. The Hinamizawa village region, object of all kinds of rumors and speculation, is closed off, and even flying overhead is prohibited. The prohibition was at one point undone as a result of a decrease in the gas's density, but that autumn another gas burst was confirmed, leading to the area being cordoned off again. Word is the area is sound asleep, all traces of its former life intact and left to rot. Oh, so there is like a river near town. Only one survivor remains. Keiichi Maibara, age, 14, who arrived at Hinamizawa village, who lived at 123 Hinamizawa village. At the time of the rescue, he had some trouble breathing due to fluid buildup in his lungs, but as a result of life-saving procedures, he was kept alive. He's currently in a general hospital somewhere in the prefecture. The press has been asking for some time, but all interviews are being refused. What did he see in Hinamizawa? What happened between the 21st and 22nd in Hinamizawa? Today he remains silent, unwilling to speak of it. I mean, they said it was a gas explosion, so clearly it wasn't anything his fault. In memoriam, the Great Hinamizawa Disaster in Memoriam List. Jiro Tomitake committed suicide, possibly on the 19th. Mio Takano strangled to death in the mountains, body burned to a crisp, investigation continues. Ueshi went missing during an investigation on the 20th. Katsuya Kuminai went missing during an investigation. Iri committed suicide. Rika murdered at the shrine on the 21st, investigation suspended. And more dead. Raina Ryugyu, Mion Sonozaki, Oryu Sonozaki, Satoko Hojo, Tepe Hojo, Ichiro, Aiko, Daiki, Suguro, Okuma. Wow, this is gonna be a long list, isn't it? Died while fleeing the disaster. Committed suicide at the victim's hospital. Oh, Shion killed herself, rip. Attempted suicide at the victim's hospital. Diagnosed with severe mental disorder. Has refused interview press. Man, it's moving too fast. I wish it was moving a bit slower so I could read it. Oh well. Higurashi scenario. Partner in crime. Alright, this is the actual credits now. So Shion technically survived but committed suicide. That sucks. I was hoping at least Shion would get out of this one alive. But no, Shion killed herself. Damn. Well, that was a depressing ending. That went even worse than expected. I was just thinking our character would be dead. And maybe that would be the end of it, or we'd be dying and that'd be the end of it. Maybe we'd get arrested and survive or some shit, only to die later, but I wasn't expecting literally everyone in town to die. Yeah, Shion lives outside the village. She committed suicide. That's why I, pointed that out. Like, she survived. She just killed herself later on. Maybe because her whole family was dead. Maybe because the curse hit her. An elderly couple living in Osaka Prefecture discovered a cassette tape while organizing the possessions of their son, who passed away 8 years ago. Their son went missing when his fishing boat capsized in 1995. He was 47 at the time of his death. 8 years later, in 2003, they'd begun to organize their son's remains in order to organize their minds and came across the cassette in question. From 1975 to 1989. The deceased had experienced working as a journalist for a photography periodical, and this tape is thought to have been created during that time. The label reads 11/28/1983, Keiichi Maibara. That is 5 days after the disaster. It is thought the tape was recorded during an interview with Keiichi, the only survivor of the Great Hinamizawa disaster that occurred in June of 1983. Wait, hold up, what time was that? Oh, it's 11/28 Doi. It's literally 6 months later. Alright. As the only person who lived through the disaster on the night of the 21st, shrouded in mystery, many interested parties attempted to question him, but never once spoke physically to anyone in a public place. Therefore, the tape caused a stir, possibly being of extremely high value. But it clicked it on its own. It had a click action. It's really hard to talk about stuff when I know I'm being recorded. Please don't worry about it. Here, it won't be a problem if I do this, right? Yeah, it's 1983, okay. After this, the sound quality dramatically decreases. Did he cover the recording device with something? Let's get started. Here's my first question. Keiichi, where were you the night of the disaster? I had gone behind the shrine and took a path through the woods for a while. There's a rope bridge there a little while before you get into the mountains. I fell and lost consciousness. Did it happen during the night, between the 21st and 22nd? No. It was the morning of the 21st, on Tuesday. Which means I woke up the afternoon of the next day. I think I was out for a day and a half. Why on earth were you there? I mean, sure, everyone wants to know, but the bridge you fell from that day. A weekday, I might add. Quite far from both your house and the school, right? Speaking frankly, there's some that say you knew the disaster beforehand and fell from the rope bridge as you were trying to flee the village. This isn't a joke. Please don't be so arbitrary about this. I think it's a terrible thing to say, too. Please don't be offended. Anyway, about the rope bridge you fell from. It was right here on the map, right? The rope bridge beyond the back of the shrine, through the path in the woods? Probably. I never went over there, so I can't say for sure. I guess I just want to know why you're out somewhere you'd never been on a weekday morning. And then, well, about the riverbed you fell unconscious on. Have you heard the rumors about that being impossible? Impossible? That word again? Again. For a while, Keiichi mutters the word impossible several times. Why would it be impossible? You know how the gas originated in the swamp? Some scholars did some pretty delicate simulations and modeling and discovered something very interesting. The gas was heavier than air. Of course, that's why it's safe. That's why you don't go in craters. That's why you don't go in volcanic craters. The gas is heavier than air, so outside the crater is safe, but inside the crater you'll suffocate. So it went along the ground, flowing lower and lower into places, kind of like water does. And with Onigafuchi Swamp as its source, they were able to test how much time it would take for the gas to erupt and spread across the village. So, well, the riverbed you were unconscious on, it would have flowed down there. I don't know what you're getting at. In other words, if you really passed out on that riverbed, you would have been in the middle of all the gas spreading everywhere that night. There's no chance you could have been passed out there. Allow me to be more frank. I think maybe you might be telling a lie. During the disaster, you were hiding in a safe space, keeping an eye out for when the gas got thinner and reappeared and were secured by the SDF. How about that? Is that right on the mark? For a short time, the journalist presses Keiichi Maibara further, in a teasing way, but all that can be heard are heavy sighs. Even if that was the case, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. What do you mean you wouldn't be surprised? Was this recording really taken of Keiichi Maibara? Some harbor suspicions. You said it before, didn't you? It was impossible. Impossible things happen in that Hinamizawa all the time. There are people who shouldn't be existing. Dead people end up alive. It's not really that unusual. Never thought I, of all people, would be asked to prove that I was still alive when I was supposed to have died. The journalist and Keiichi Maibara both laughed for a while. To verify its authenticity, I had others in the Maibara family check the tapes with his voice in it. However, the sound was not clear and much time had passed, so the relatives I checked with couldn't remember what he sounded like. I was actually unable to gain positive proof it was actually his voice. Alright then, I'll change the subject. What do you think of the debate about whether this— oh god, 2 layers of text? Whether this disaster was the curse, the 5th year of the serial freak incidents in Hinamizawa? I don't think it was. I was the curse that year, after all. What do you mean? What? I was just answering the question. Doubts remain regarding the date 11/28 written on the tape. The curse. Well, you probably won't believe me when I tell you this. I was the one who caused it. I was the one who wished for the whole village to die, and it happened. What an exciting story. Exciting? I suppose you could call it that. After Maibara Keiichi's failed suicide attempt on a certain August day 2 months after the disaster, he was diagnosed with a mental disorder and transported to a treatment facility. I was the one who killed Takano, Coach, and Uishi too. At the time, I had some sort of divine power. Yeah, I suppose it was like footsteps. Footsteps? Wait, what's that supposed to mean? You never heard footsteps before? Tip, tap, click, click. The facility never allowed any news coverage, so it's extremely unlikely that a tape from the media dated August 1983 would have his voice on it. Wasn't it literally dated 11/28? Anyway, today, when you're walking around, try stopping suddenly. Something interesting will happen. Anyway, if you hear an extra footstep, even though you've already stopped walking, you'd better be careful, you know? yeah, I'll be careful. Is what I'm saying really that funny to you? The reporter had been criticized for his forceful methods of collecting data while he was active, so there's a possibility he broke into the facility and forced Maibara to talk. You've been doing nothing but laugh in my face this whole time. You're just like Coach. You pretend to sympathize with me and to listen to what I have to say, but your eyes are telling me you think I'm a lunatic. That's not true. No, I can tell. Your eyes are the same as Coach's. Is this truly Keiichi Maibara's voice? The authenticity of this recording is still wrapped in mystery. I never heard the footsteps again after that day, so I don't think I have that terrible power anymore. Perhaps, right here, right now, I'll wish for you to die. I'll wish for your death for saying all those unpleasant things. This time, why don't I decide how you die? Takano was burned to death, so let's go with the opposite, with water. I hope you drown and die. How's that? "15 years after this tape was created, the reporter, just as Keiichi Maibara had predicted, died in an accident out on the sea. I'm in top form like I was then. You'd die before tomorrow morning for sure. Now then, I wonder how many days it will take you to drown." Wait, is that a picture of Keiichi now? That's our first picture of Keiichi? You better be careful, you know? Don't go getting yourself killed by some stupid curse put on you, okay? The recording ends in the middle of Keiichi Maibara's laughter. And Maibara? Late on the night of the 30th of November 1983, 2 days after the interview, he suddenly died from a high fever, cause unknown. Records remain of the strange words he kept giving after pressing the call button the day before he died. An extra set of footsteps. That's all he said. An extra set of footsteps. Alright, that's definitely the ending. And that was a pretty good ending. I think that was good. I wasn't expecting everyone to die like that, but hey. Good times. In an all-cast review session, the play to just see just what our characters think in character of that story. Right. I'm ready for the next one. I hope you guys are too.